All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're tackling a creature that's, I think, pretty fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
especially for anybody interested in resilience and how animals have adapted to survive in
Yeah.
all sorts of crazy situations. And that is the nine-banded armadillo.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
Yeah,
They're so cool.
they really are. And I think people maybe only have a very surface-level understanding of them.
Yeah,
That they've
yeah.
got this armor. But there's so much more to it.
So much more.
So much more. We're going to get into all that today.
Yeah.
But I guess the first thing you think about with an armadillo is that shell, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's got to be the shell.
You see one of those things walking around and scratch. Immediately like, oh, there's something different about this guy.
Yeah, and it's not just like a big solid piece of bone.
Yeah.
It's got these 9 bands on it, which is
Yeah.
where the name comes from.
Right, exactly. Nine-banded armadillo. That's
Yeah.
where the name comes from, those 9 bands that you see on their shell. And that kind of begs the question, well, what are those bands made of?
Yeah.
And why are they there?
How those bands are made of.
So those bands are made up of these bony plates called scutes.
Okay.
And scutes are really cool. They're kind of like individual pieces of armor that are all kind of fused together. And it provides this really amazing protection for the armadillo. Because unlike a turtle shell, which is just one solid piece, this kind of banded structure
Okay.
actually gives the armadillo a lot of flexibility so it can move around really easily.
Right.
While still being, incredibly well protected.
Yeah, so like it can bend and flex.
Exactly. It can bend and flex. It can dig with its claws. It's
Right.
got a lot of freedom of movement.
Okay, and then, of course,
Mm.
the classic image of an armadillo
Yeah.
is it curled up
Oh, yeah. The armored ball.
in a ball, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what can even get through that?
Yeah. Very few things. Very few things. They tuck their head in their soft underbelly.
Yeah.
All up inside that shell. So it's really just like this impenetrable ball of armor.
I mean, you got to imagine, like, the kind of predator that
Right.
could even, like, attempt
You'd have to have some serious jaws
to get through that.
to even try.
Yeah, like, what's gonna bite through that?
Maybe like a jaguar or a mountain lion. Something with some real crushing power.
Wow. Okay, so, I mean, that's pretty wild. Okay. It can't just be about the shell, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be other stuff
Oh, yeah.
that makes this thing so resilient.
Absolutely.
So what else we got?
Well, think about those claws for a second.
Yeah.
Those claws are incredibly powerful. I mean, they're not just there for show,
Right.
These armadillos are serious diggers. I mean, they create these elaborate burrows that they use for shelter and to find food.
So that's what they're using them for.
Exactly.
The digging.
It's all about digging. And these burrows are amazing. I mean, they can be up to 15 feet long.
Wow. And 6 feet deep.
That's a serious burrow.
I mean, that's a serious hole in the ground. And here's what's even cooler. These burrows don't just provide shelter for the armadillos.
Wow.
They actually become homes for a whole bunch of other animals, too.
So they're like making little ecosystems?
They are. They're like little ecosystem engineers. You get burrowing owls in there. You get snakes, sometimes opossums even.
Wow.
So these armadillos are kind of inadvertently creating these little housing opportunities just by doing their thing.
That's amazing. Okay, so they're digging these burrows.
Yeah.
But what are they digging up?
Well,
Like, what are they eating?
You might be surprised to hear this, but their diet mainly consists of insects.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're insectivores.
I would have thought, like, roots and tubers.
I know, right? You think they're down there digging. They must be going for something big. But no, they've got this incredible adaptation for catching insects.
What is that?
Their tongue.
Okay.
It's amazing their tongue is almost twice the length of their head.
And it's covered in this sticky saliva.
Yeah.
So they can basically just like sweep their tongue through the soil. And it's like fly paper. All the insects just get stuck to it.
That's awesome.
It's super effective. And they don't just rely on sight for hunting either. Their sense of smell is so acute, they can literally sniff out those tasty insects underground.
So like a
Yeah.
truffle pig, but armored.
Exactly, like a tiny armored truffle pig.
That's a great way to think about it. Okay, so we've talked about the shell. We've talked about the claws. You mentioned that they can hold their breath
Oh, yeah, that's another big one.
for a long time.
That's right.
So how long are we talking in
Okay, so we're talking like up to 6 minutes.
6 minutes? Wow.
6 minutes, they can hold their breath.
That's insane.
It's pretty incredible. And it's not just a random superpower.
Okay.
This breath-holding ability is actually super important for their survival.
How so?
Well, for one thing, they often forage for food underwater.
Really?
Yeah, they'll walk along the bottom of rivers and streams,
Makes a breathless sound effect.
looking for insects and other tasty morsels.
That's amazing.
And it's also a pretty clever escape tactic.
Oh.
If a predator comes along, they can just sink to the bottom,
Yeah.
hold their breath, and walk away.
Wow. Okay, that's super cool.
Pretty sneaky, right?
Yeah. All right, so clearly these things are super resilient.
They're survivors.
They're survivors.
Mm.
Yeah, so where can we find them? Like, where do they live?
But their range is actually incredibly vast.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking from the southern U.S. all the way down to Argentina.
Wow.
So all across the Americas.
Okay.
And here's what's really impressive. They thrive in all sorts of different habitats. You find them in grasslands, forests, even deserts.
Deserts?
Yeah, deserts.
How do they survive in the desert?
Well, they've got some pretty neat adaptations. For one thing, they're really good at regulating their body temperature.
Okay.
So they can handle that desert heat pretty well.
And then obviously
Of course.
the swimming comes in handy.
Exactly.
If they're in a more...
When they need to cool off, they can find a watering hole. Take a dip.
Wow.
So yeah, they're incredibly adaptable, and that's a big part of why they're so successful across such a wide range.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how they've managed to carve out a niche
It really is.
in all these different
Wow.
places. But with such a wide range, I imagine they must face some threats too.
Right. Unfortunately, yeah, that's true. I mean, habitat destruction is a big one.
Okay.
Human development is encroaching on their territory. And then because they often forage near roads, road accidents are a constant danger.
Right.
It's a reminder that even the toughest creatures are vulnerable to human impact.
Yeah, that's definitely a sobering thought.
Uh.
Okay, before we end on a sad note.
Yeah, let's talk about the positives.
Let's talk about positives. I mean, they do play a pretty crucial role in these ecosystems, right?
They do.
Like keeping the insect populations
Right. They're natural pest control.
in check.
They're keeping those insect populations in check. And like we talked about earlier, their burrows provide homes for other animals, which really boosts biodiversity in their habitats.
Like so, kind of like a reminder that every
It really is.
has its place.
It's all connected.
Well, now.
Yeah, the nine-banded armadillo, I think, is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
They might seem unusual, but they play a vital role in maintaining the balance of nature.
So to wrap things up here today, I think we've learned that the nine-banded armadillo is a really incredible creature.
Absolutely.
They've got these amazing adaptations for survival. They show us what resilience really means. And, they're just a fascinating example of how life finds a way to thrive in all sorts of environments. So now that you know a little bit more about the nine-banded armadillo and how it survives, I'd like you to think about what other creatures might have similar surprising adaptations that allow them to thrive. So keep exploring, keep learning, and until next time, happy diving.
Happy diving.
Expert